Japanese POW women hid their pregnant friend in terror, because discovery meant one thing: the child would be taken away. Behind barbed wire in a forgotten Pacific camp, 3 women smuggled food, disguised weight, whispered lies to guards. Pregnancy meant interrogation. It meant removal. It meant a baby stolen before its first breath. Then 2 Black Army doctors noticed the fear in their eyes. Segregated, disrespected, treated like the enemy themselves. They understood what it meant to be seen as less than human. So they made a promise: no regulation allowed. They falsified the records, hid her from inspections. And when a racist major began his hunt, they risked everything. A storm, a supply shed, a premature birth in the darkness, while armed guards closed in. When mercy is treason and silence is survival, how far will strangers go to protect one fragile life? And what happens when the door finally breaks open and the world discovers what they've been hiding? The morning sun burned through the fence wire. Captain Isaiah Holt watched 3 Japanese women shuffle forward in the inspection line. Their bare feet kicked up red dust with each step. Guards in khaki uniforms shouted orders nobody understood. The camp stretched across flat ground surrounded by jungle. Barbed wire glittered in the heat. Wooden barracks sagged under tin roofs that cooked prisoners during the day. Holt stood near the medical tent, his uniform stuck to his skin. One of the women stumbled. She grabbed her stomach. Her friends moved closer on both sides. They formed a wall with their thin bodies. "Keep moving!" A white sergeant waved his rifle. "Line up straight!" The women pressed together. The one in the middle trembled. Her name tag read Reiko in crude letters. Holt noticed her hands wrapped around her belly. Her knuckles turned white. Lieutenant David Monroe stood beside Holt. He adjusted his medical bag. "That rumor might be true," he whispered. Holt nodded once. Pregnant women got removed from the camp. Everyone knew the stories: interrogation posts, missing infants, women who never returned. The sergeant shoved Reiko toward the inspection table. She nearly fell. Her 2 friends caught her. One was tall and angular. The other had short black hair and fierce eyes. Their name tags read Yuki and Hana. "Move it." The sergeant raised his hand. Holt stepped forward. "Sergeant, I need to examine them properly." His voice stayed level. "Medical protocol requires decent treatment." The sergeant turned. His face twisted. "Since when do you give orders, Captain?" He said the rank with poison in it. Holt met his stare. "Since I'm the camp doctor." The sergeant spat in the dirt. He walked away, muttering curses. The women stood frozen. Reiko swayed. Holt moved closer. He kept his hands visible, non-threatening. "Sit down," he said quietly. He pointed to a wooden bench. "Please." The women did not understand English, but they understood kindness. They helped Reiko to the bench. She collapsed onto the wood. Her chest heaved with frightened breaths. Holt crouched down. He made eye contact with each woman. Fear stared back at him, the kind of fear that came from knowing your life meant nothing to the men with guns. Monroe brought water in a metal cup. Reiko drank with shaking hands. The sun climbed higher. More prisoners shuffled through the line. Guards barked and shoved and cursed. Holt stood slowly. He looked at Monroe. They both saw it. Reiko's belly curved beneath her loose dress. Not much, but enough. The inspection dragged forward. Holt slowed each check. He gave the women small moments of dignity. He spoke softly. He did not touch unless necessary. The guards grew impatient but did not interfere. By midday, the women returned to their barracks. They walked close together. Reiko leaned on her friends. Holt watched them disappear into the shadow of the women's quarters. His chest felt tight. Monroe stood beside him. "You saw it too." "Yeah." Holt picked up his medical bag. I saw it. The medical tent smelled bitter. Old canvas and alcohol and sweat. Holt sat at a wooden table covered with files. Monroe stood at the supply cabinet. He counted bandages that never seemed to be enough. A white sergeant sat in the corner. He typed reports on a machine that clicked and dinged. He ignored the black doctors. They were furniture to him. Holt opened the files for the 3 women. The pages were thin. Information barely filled half a sheet. Previous medics had written comments in the margins. Cruel jokes, racial slurs, medical observations mixed with hatred. "These records are garbage," Monroe said. He read over Holt's shoulder. "Half the dates don't match." Holt turned a page. Someone had written uncooperative next to Yuki's name. Another note said possible disease carrier, with no evidence. The files treated the women less than human. "If one of them is pregnant," Monroe continued, "they'll remove her within 24 hours. He kept his voice low. The typing sergeant paid no attention. Holt knew the procedure. Pregnant prisoners went to interrogation posts. The military wanted information. They thought pregnant women would break under pressure, talk about resistance networks, reveal hiding places. "Where do they take them?" Holt asked. Monroe shook his head. "Nobody says, but I heard stories from medics at other camps." He paused. "Infants get placed for adoption. Mothers disappear into prison facilities." The tent grew hotter. Flies buzzed near the entrance. Outside, guards shouted during rifle drills. The sound echoed across the compound. Holt closed the files. His jaw tightened. He had seen enough cruelty in this war. Segregated units. White officers who treated black soldiers worse than dogs. Orders that made no sense except to remind everyone who held power. But this felt different. 3 women who did nothing except exist in the wrong place during wartime. And now one of them carried a child that would be stolen the moment anyone found out. "I need to examine them again," Holt said. "Privately." Monroe glanced at the typing sergeant. "That'll draw attention." "I don't care." Holt stood. He tucked the files under his arm. "If she's pregnant, I need to know how far along. And I need to know before someone else figures it out." Monroe studied his friend. They had served together for 2 years. Survived training camps where white soldiers sabotaged their equipment. Worked in field hospitals where wounded men refused treatment from black doctors. They had learned to keep their heads down. But Monroe saw something different in Holt's eyes now. A line being drawn. A decision being made. "You're taking a risk," Monroe warned. "I'm aware." Holt moved toward the tent exit. Afternoon heat waited outside. Storm clouds gathered on the horizon. The air felt heavy. Monroe grabbed his medical bag. "Then I'm coming with you." They walked across the compound. Dust covered their boots. Prisoners watched from behind wire fences. Guards stood on platforms with rifles. The women's barracks sat at the far edge of the camp. Holt felt eyes following him. White soldiers noticed everything black officers did, especially when it involved spending extra time with prisoners. But he kept walking. The women needed help. And in a place designed to crush humanity, that seemed reason enough. The women's barracks looked ready to collapse. Wood planks warped from rain and sun. The roof sagged in the middle. Small windows let in dim light and mosquitoes. Holt knocked on the doorframe. Monroe stood beside him. Inside, women huddled on bunks made from scrap lumber. The air smelled stale. Too many bodies in too small a space. Yuki appeared at the door. She recognized the doctors. Her eyes narrowed with suspicion. Or maybe fear. Holt could not tell the difference anymore. "Routine health check," Holt said slowly. He held up his medical bag. "We need to examine everyone again." Yuki did not move. Behind her, Hana whispered in Japanese. Other women shifted nervously. They knew inspections meant trouble. Monroe stepped forward. He pulled out a stethoscope. "We just want to make sure everyone stays healthy." His voice stayed gentle. "Please." Yuki finally stepped aside. The doctors entered. The barracks interior was worse than outside. Bunks lined both walls. Thin blankets, no privacy. A bucket in the corner served as a latrine. Reiko sat on a lower bunk near the back. She pulled her knees to her chest. Her friends moved close on either side. A wall of protection. Holt approached slowly. He crouched down to their eye level. "I need to examine Reiko." He pointed to her, then to himself, then made a gesture for checking. The women spoke rapidly in Japanese. Their voices rose with panic. Hana grabbed Reiko's arm. Yuki blocked the doctors with her body. "We're not going to hurt her," Monroe said. He set down his bag. He pulled out clean bandages and showed them. "We want to help." Holt understood their terror. Every white man in uniform meant danger. Doctors could be the worst. They poked and prodded and wrote reports that destroyed lives. "Please," Holt said quietly. He met Reiko's eyes. "Let me check. Just check." The moment stretched. Other women in the barracks pretended not to watch. But everyone listened. Everyone waited. Finally, Yuki nodded. She and Hana helped Reiko stand. They created a small curtain using 2 thin blankets hung from nails. Monroe stood guard at the door. Behind the makeshift curtain, Holt examined Reiko. His hands moved professionally, gently. He checked her pulse, listened to her heart, then placed his hand on her abdomen. The swell was unmistakable. 7 months at least, maybe more. The baby moved beneath his palm. Reiko watched his face. Tears rolled down her cheeks. She whispered something in Japanese. It sounded desperate, pleading. Holt lowered his hand. He met her eyes. She was terrified. Not of him. Of what would happen when the truth came out. Yuki pulled the curtain back. She looked at Holt. Her expression asked the question her words could not form. Holt stood slowly. He felt the stares of every woman in the barracks. Monroe waited by the door, silent, tense. "She needs rest," Holt said loudly enough for everyone to hear, "and extra water. Make sure she drinks." He picked up his bag. The women did not move. They understood what he did not say, what he chose not to report. Outside, the afternoon sun beat down. Holt walked quickly. Monroe followed. Neither spoke until they were far from the barracks. "You're not going to report it," Monroe said. It was not a question. "No," Holt replied. "I'm not." Holt and Monroe walked toward the medical tent. The afternoon heat pressed down from a white sky. Sweat soaked through their uniforms. Behind them, the women's barracks disappeared behind other buildings. A voice called out, "Captain!" They stopped. Corporal Mills approached from the guard tower. He was young and pale with narrow eyes. His rifle hung loose across his chest. He smiled without warmth. "Saw you coming from the women's quarters," Mills said. He stopped too close. Invasion of space, a power move. "That's unusual." Holt kept his face neutral. "Routine medical check. Part of my duties." Mills tilted his head. "Took you a while. Must have been real thorough." He dragged out the last word. Made it sound dirty. Monroe shifted his medical bag to his other hand. "We examine everyone carefully. Regulations require it." "Regulations," Mills laughed. It sounded sharp, mean. "You boys sure do love hiding behind regulations." He stepped even closer. "Maybe you were doing something else in there. Something off the record." Holt felt anger rise in his chest. He pushed it down. Showing emotion gave men like Mills exactly what they wanted. An excuse to escalate. Is there a problem, Corporal? Holt asked. His voice stayed level. Mills looked him up and down. Problem is you medics spending extra time with prisoners, especially Jap women. He spat the slur casually. Makes people wonder what you're really doing. We're doing our jobs, Monroe said. Same as you're supposed to be doing. Mills's face hardened. Watch your mouth, Lieutenant. You might be officers, but you're still... He stopped himself. The word hung unspoken between them. Holt knew what came next. He had heard it 1,000 times. From white officers who resented taking orders from black men. From soldiers who thought skin color determined worth. From guards who treated prisoners and black medics with equal contempt. We're still what, Corporal? Holt stepped forward. Not threatening, just refusing to back down. Mills's hand moved toward his rifle, not quite touching it, just reminding everyone it was there. You're uppity, he said quietly, and uppity medics get noticed. You understand me? The compound around them continued its routine. Prisoners in work details, guards smoking near the fence, jeeps rumbling past. Nobody paid attention to 3 men standing in the dust. But Holt felt the danger. Mills was not just racist, he was suspicious, and suspicious men asked questions, filed reports, watched for mistakes. We understand, Monroe said quickly. He touched Holt's arm, a warning. We'll be more careful about how long we spend on inspections. Mills studied them both. His smile returned, cruel and satisfied. That's right. Be careful. He adjusted his rifle. Wouldn't want anyone thinking you're protecting prisoners. That'd be real bad for you. He walked away slowly, made a show of it, looked back twice to make sure they watched him go. When he was out of earshot, Monroe exhaled. That was close. Holt's hands were fists. He forced them open. His palms ached. He's going to watch us now. Yeah. Monroe started walking again. We need to be smart about this. They reached the medical tent. The typing sergeant was gone. Supplies sat on shelves in neat rows. Files waited on the desk. Everything looked normal. Safe. But Holt knew better. Safety was an illusion. Mills would talk to other guards. They would pay attention to the black doctors, watch their movements, note their interactions with prisoners. And if anyone discovered Reiko's pregnancy, they would ask how the doctors missed it during inspection. We can't leave her to them, Holt said quietly. Can't let them take that baby. Monroe closed the tent flap. They were alone. Then we need a plan, because Mills isn't stupid, and neither is Major Crenshaw. The sun began its slow descent toward the horizon. Shadows stretched across the compound. Somewhere in the distance, a radio played propaganda. American voices promising freedom and justice for all. Holt sat at the desk. The irony tasted bitter. Yeah, he said. We need a plan. Night fell over the camp. Blackout curtains covered every window. Guards patrolled with flashlights. The jungle beyond the wire hummed with insects. Holt and Monroe sat in their tent. It was segregated from the white officers' quarters. Smaller. Fewer amenities. A kerosene lamp burned on a crate between their bunks. Monroe cleaned his medical instruments. The work kept his hands busy. Holt stared at Reiko's file. The pages seemed to accuse him. If we falsify her records, Monroe said without looking up, and they find out, we're finished. He wiped down a scalpel. Court-martial, prison, maybe worse. Holt knew the stakes. Black officers who disobeyed orders got crushed. The military had rules about that. Examples needed to be made. Discipline had to be maintained. If we don't falsify the records, Holt replied, they take her tomorrow. Remove the baby. Maybe kill them both. He closed the file. I can't let that happen. Monroe set down his instruments. He looked at his friend. They had been through training together, survived white instructors who failed them on purpose, endured field postings where they treated shrapnel wounds and amputations with inadequate supplies. They had saved lives, done their duty, followed orders even when those orders felt wrong. But this was different. This was choosing between military protocol and basic humanity. You know what they'll call us? Monroe said quietly. Traitor? Sympathizer? They'll say we're protecting the enemy? She's not the enemy, Holt's voice rose. She's a civilian, a pregnant woman who did nothing except be born in the wrong country. He stood, paced. The tent felt too small. Monroe watched him. I agree with you. You know I do. He paused. But we need to think this through. If we get caught, we can't help anyone. Not her, not the other prisoners, not the soldiers who need doctors they can trust. Outside, a radio crackled. Propaganda filled the night. American voices declared the war was about defending freedom, fighting for justice, protecting the innocent. Holt stopped pacing. He listened to the broadcast. The words felt empty, hollow. How could they talk about freedom while running internment camps? How could they speak about justice while segregating their own soldiers? I'm tired of doing nothing, Holt said. Tired of watching people suffer because the system says their lives don't matter. He turned to Monroe. That baby matters. That woman matters. And if nobody else is going to protect them, then I will. Monroe stood slowly. He walked to Holt, put a hand on his shoulder. Then we do it together. His voice was steady, resolved. But we're smart about it. We cover our tracks. We don't take unnecessary risks. Holt nodded, relief mixed with fear in his chest. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Monroe returned to his bunk. We're probably about to ruin our careers, maybe our lives. They sat in silence. The lamp flickered. Shadows danced on the canvas walls. Outside, boots marched past. A guard called out the hourly report. Everything normal. Everything routine. Holt pulled out a pen. He opened Reiko's file to the medical examination page. His hand hovered over the blank space. This was the moment, the decision point. Once he wrote the lie, there was no taking it back. Monroe watched without speaking. Holt took a breath. He pressed pen to paper. Medical examination conducted July 15, 1944, he wrote carefully. Patient shows no signs of pregnancy. Abdomen normal. No abnormalities detected. The words looked official, professional. Complete lies. He signed his name at the bottom. Captain Isaiah Holt. His signature felt heavier than usual. Monroe leaned over, added his own name as witness. Lieutenant David Monroe. 2 black doctors committing fraud to save a life. Holt closed the file. The lamp burned lower. Dawn would come in a few hours. He needed to submit the report before anyone asked questions. Get some sleep, Monroe said. He lay back on his bunk. Tomorrow gets complicated. Holt did not sleep. He lay awake, watching shadows, thinking about Reiko, about the baby growing inside her, about what would happen when the truth finally came out. Because it would come out. Secrets always did in places like this. Morning came gray and hot. Holt dressed in the dark. Monroe stirred on his bunk but did not speak. They both knew what had to happen. Holt tucked Reiko's file under his arm. The falsified report sat inside. Evidence of their crime, or their courage, depending on who judged them. The compound woke slowly. Prisoners shuffled to work details. Guards yawned on towers. Smoke rose from the mess hall. Everything looked ordinary. But Holt's heart pounded. The administrative hut sat near the camp entrance. A white corporal worked inside as a clerk. He processed paperwork, filed reports, stamped documents without reading them. Holt hoped the man would be lazy this morning. He climbed 3 wooden steps. The door stood open. Inside, the clerk sat behind a desk covered with papers. A fan turned overhead. Did nothing to cut the heat. "Morning, Captain." The clerk barely looked up. "What do you need?" Holt placed the file on the desk. "Medical reports from yesterday's inspection. Women's barracks. Needs to be filed." The clerk pulled the file closer. He flipped it open. His eyes scanned the page. Holt forced himself to breathe normally. Act natural. This was routine paperwork. Nothing suspicious. The clerk yawned. He picked up a rubber stamp, inked it, pressed it onto the report. The word "filed" appeared in red letters. "Anything else?" The clerk closed the file, tossed it onto a stack of other documents. "No." Holt kept his voice steady. "That's everything." He turned to leave. Each step felt measured. Careful. Do not rush. Do not look guilty. Just a doctor submitting routine paperwork. Outside, the sun broke through clouds. Heat poured down. Holt walked back toward the medical tent. His hands did not shake until he was out of sight. Monroe met him near the supply shed. "Done?" "Done." Holt leaned against the wall. Relief made him dizzy. He stamped it without really looking. Monroe nodded. "Good. That buys us time." He glanced around, made sure nobody listened. "But we need to prepare for inspections. Crenshaw's been suspicious lately." Major Crenshaw ran the camp operations. He was mean and ambitious, the kind of officer who climbed ranks by crushing anyone beneath him. He particularly hated black officers, called them affirmative action mistakes. "When's he due back?" Holt asked. "Today." Monroe watched the road leading into camp. Supply run ended yesterday. His jeep should arrive by noon. Holt's relief faded. Crenshaw would want updates. He would review reports. He might notice discrepancies, or worse, order his own inspections. A jeep engine rumbled in the distance. Both doctors turned. Dust rose from the access road. A vehicle approached. "That's him," Monroe said quietly. The jeep came through the gate. Major Crenshaw sat in the passenger seat. He was thick-shouldered with a face that always looked angry. His uniform was crisp despite the heat. He stepped out, surveyed the compound. His eyes swept over Holt and Monroe. They snapped to attention. Saluted. Crenshaw returned the salute slowly, mockingly. "Doctors?" He said it without respect. "Anything interesting happen while I was gone?" "No, sir," Monroe replied. "Routine operations only." Crenshaw's eyes narrowed. He looked at Holt. "You're the one who did inspections yesterday, the women's barracks." It was not a question. Holt's stomach tightened. "Yes, sir. Standard health checks. Everything was normal." "Normal." Crenshaw stepped closer. "I heard you spent extra time there. Some guards noticed." He paused. Let the accusation hang. "Why would that be?" Holt kept his face blank. "Poor record-keeping by previous medics. I needed to update files properly. Military regulations require thorough documentation." Crenshaw stared at him. Holt stared back. Neither blinked. The moment stretched. Finally, Crenshaw grunted. "Regulations." He turned away. "Make sure you follow them, Captain. All of them. We wouldn't want any mistakes." He walked toward the administrative hut. His boots hit the ground hard. Deliberate. Holt and Monroe remained at attention until he disappeared inside. Then Monroe exhaled. "He knows something." "Maybe." Holt's jaw ached. He realized he had been clenching it. Or maybe he's just fishing. "Either way," Monroe said, "we're on his radar now." They watched the administrative hut. Crenshaw would see the filed reports. He would read Holt's examination notes. He might accept them. Or he might order new inspections just to make the black doctors uncomfortable. The sun climbed higher. The day grew hotter. Holt felt trapped, caught between duty and conscience, between survival and righteousness. But Reiko was alive. The baby was still hidden. For now, that was enough. Midday sun turned the training yard into an oven. Prisoners worked under guard supervision. Holt and Monroe organized medical supplies near the tent. Sweat dripped from their faces. Major Crenshaw appeared without warning. He walked with purpose. 2 guards followed. His expression promised trouble. Captain Holt. Crenshaw stopped close. Too close. Lieutenant Monroe, join me. It was not a request. They followed him to the shade near the equipment shed. The guards stood within earshot. Everything Crenshaw did, he did with witnesses. "I've been reviewing reports," Crenshaw said. He pulled out a folded paper. "Your medical examination of the Japanese women, very thorough." His tone made it sound suspicious. Holt said nothing. Monroe stood rigid beside him. "But I find it interesting," Crenshaw continued, "that you spent 40 minutes in that barracks. For 3 women. That's quite a lot of time for routine checks." He unfolded the paper. Pretended to read. "Some guards think maybe you were doing more than checking vitals." The accusation hung in the air. Holt felt anger rise. Crenshaw was implying something disgusting, something that would destroy their careers even faster than falsifying documents. "The records were incomplete," Holt said evenly. "Previous medics left gaps in documentation. I corrected them properly. That takes time." Crenshaw smiled. It was cruel. "Of course, documentation." He refolded the paper. "But here's the thing, Captain. I don't trust incomplete work, especially from medics who might be too sympathetic to prisoners." Monroe tensed. Holt felt it. They both knew where this led. "So I'm ordering new inspections," Crenshaw announced. "Random wellness checks, all prisoners, starting with the women's barracks." He paused. "Tonight." Holt's chest tightened. "Sir, frequent inspections cause stress. It's counterproductive to maintaining health." "I don't recall asking for your medical opinion," Crenshaw snapped. "I'm giving you an order. Tonight at 2000 hours. Full examination. All females. And I'll be present to observe." The guards shifted. One smiled slightly. They enjoyed watching black officers get put in their place. "Yes, sir," Holt forced himself to say. Crenshaw turned to leave, then stopped, looked back. "One more thing. If I find out you've been protecting anyone, hiding anything, or otherwise failing in your duties, I'll have you both court-martialed." He stepped closer, lowered his voice. "And I'll make sure everyone knows why, understand?" The threat was clear. Not just professional destruction, personal humiliation, racial disgrace. Crenshaw would frame it as black officers betraying their country for enemy prisoners. "We understand, sir," Monroe said quietly. Crenshaw walked away. The guards followed. Their laughter drifted back across the yard. Holt and Monroe stood in the shade. Neither spoke for a long moment. The heat pressed down. Prisoners continued working. Life in the camp went on. "We have to warn them," Monroe finally said. "Before tonight." Holt nodded. His mind raced. How could they hide Reiko during an inspection? Crenshaw would be watching. The guards would be thorough. Every woman would be examined. "We need to move fast," Holt said, "and we need a plan." They returned to the medical tent, grabbed supplies, made it look routine. Nobody could know they were about to help prisoners hide evidence from their commanding officer. The afternoon dragged on. Every minute felt heavy. Holt treated minor injuries, distributed medicine, acted normal while his thoughts spiraled, At 1600 hours, he found a reason to walk past the women's barracks. A guard stood near the entrance. Holt could not approach directly. He waited. The guard got called away for a moment. Holt moved quickly, knocked twice on the barracks door. A code. A warning. Yuki appeared. She saw his face, understood immediately that something was wrong. "Tonight," Holt whispered urgently. "Inspection. Crenshaw coming." He made gestures, pointed at his watch, held up 8 fingers. "Hide her." Yuki's eyes widened. She nodded once, disappeared inside. The door closed. Holt walked away. His heart hammered. The guard returned to his post. Noticed nothing. Monroe met him behind the supply shed. "Did they understand?" "I think so." Holt leaned against the wall. "But I don't know if they can hide her well enough. Not with Crenshaw watching." The sun began its descent. Shadows lengthened. Evening approached, and with it, the inspection that could destroy everything. Dusk settled over the camp. Lanterns flickered to life. The blackout countdown began. Prisoners returned from work details. Guards changed shifts. Holt moved through the compound with purpose. He carried his medical bag, walked toward the women's barracks, tried to appear routine, professional. Monroe stayed at the medical tent. They agreed to stagger their movements, draw less attention, but both knew Crenshaw would be watching. Holt reached the barracks. The same guard stood nearby. He nodded at Holt. "Early for the inspection, Captain." "Wanted to prepare the space," Holt lied smoothly. "Make sure everything's ready when the major arrives." The guard shrugged, went back to smoking his cigarette. Holt entered the barracks. Twilight filtered through gaps in the walls. Women huddled on bunks. They watched him with frightened eyes. Yuki approached quickly. She grabbed his arm, led him to the back corner. Hana waited there. She pointed down. A loose floorboard, barely visible unless you knew where to look. Yuki knelt, lifted the board. Beneath was a shallow space, maybe 2 feet deep, dark and cramped. Smuggled blankets lined the bottom, a small cache of dried fish, water in a cracked canteen. Reiko crouched inside. Her face was pale, terrified. The space looked barely big enough for her pregnant body. "Can she stay there during the inspection?" Holt whispered. "Can she stay quiet?" Yuki and Hana nodded. They had practiced, prepared, but their eyes showed doubt. What if Reiko cried out? What if the baby moved? Holt knelt beside the hiding space. He looked at Reiko. She met his gaze. He wished he could tell her everything would be fine. But he did not speak Japanese, and she did not speak English, so he placed his hand over his heart. A gesture, a promise. "I will protect you." Reiko's hand came up, touched his, just for a second. Then she curled deeper into the space. Yuki and Hana replaced the floorboard. They moved a thin mattress over it, scattered belongings across the floor, made it look natural, lived in. Nothing unusual. Holt helped them reinforce the camouflage. He added a broken crate, an old shirt. Small things that drew the eye away from that specific spot. Outside, boots approached. Multiple sets. Holt stood quickly. The door opened. Crenshaw entered first. He wore a pristine uniform. His face was hard. Behind him came 3 guards with rifles, and Monroe carrying his medical bag. "Evening, Captain," Crenshaw said coldly. "Shall we begin?" The women pressed against the walls. Fear rolled off them. They understood this was not routine. This was a hunt. Crenshaw walked slowly through the barracks. He studied every corner, every shadow. His eyes missed nothing. "Line them up," he ordered. "I want to see every face." The guards moved fast, shoved women into formation. Someone cried out, got hit for making noise. The violence was casual. practiced. Holt counted the women. 22, not including Reiko hidden beneath the floor. Would Crenshaw notice? Would he count them himself? "How many prisoners assigned to this barracks?" Crenshaw asked the guard sergeant. The sergeant checked a clipboard. 23, sir." Crenshaw's head swiveled. His eyes scanned the line. "I count 22. Where's the other one?" Yuki stepped forward. She spoke broken English. "One woman. Sick. Very sick. In latrine." She pointed to the bucket in the corner, made gagging sounds. Crenshaw frowned. "Show me." Yuki led him to the bucket. She lifted the lid. The smell rose up. Genuine. Horrible. Nobody faked that. Crenshaw stepped back. His face twisted. "She's in the latrine. Outside?" "Yes. Long time. Very sick." Yuki bowed repeatedly. Apologetic? Convincing. Crenshaw hesitated. He looked at Holt. "Is that medically plausible?" Holt's throat felt dry. "Dysentery's common in camps. Severe cases keep patients in latrines for extended periods." The lie rolled out smoothly, professionally. Crenshaw stared at him. Testing. Probing for weakness. Thunder rumbled in the distance. A storm was building. The first drops of rain hit the roof. "Fine," Crenshaw finally said. "We'll check the latrine after. Begin examinations." Holt and Monroe moved through the line. They checked each woman quickly. Pulse, heart rate, basic vitals. Crenshaw watched every movement. The rain intensified. Water leaked through the roof, created puddles on the floor. Near the back corner. Near where Reiko hid. Holt's heart pounded. Would the water seep through the floorboard? Would she cough or move? Lightning flashed. Thunder followed. The storm grew violent. Rain hammered the tin roof. The noise was deafening. Perfect cover. They finished examinations. Every woman accounted for. Except the one supposedly in the latrine. Crenshaw moved toward the door. "Let's check on that sick prisoner." Outside, rain fell in sheets. The compound flooded. Guards huddled under overhangs. Lanterns flickered and died. Crenshaw stood at the threshold. Rain poured down. He would have to walk 50 yards through mud to reach the latrines. He looked at the storm. Then at Holt. "Tomorrow," he said finally. "We'll verify everyone tomorrow during daylight." He turned to the guards. "Post 2 men here overnight. Nobody leaves." The guards groaned but obeyed. Crenshaw walked into the rain, disappeared toward the officer quarters. Holt and Monroe remained inside. The women stayed frozen in place. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The guards settled near the door. Rain and thunder filled the night. Under the floorboard, Reiko stayed silent. Stayed hidden. Stayed alive. For now. Rain hammered through the night. The guards at the barracks door huddled under their ponchos. Water pooled on the floor inside. Women lay silent on their bunks. Holt watched from the medical tent across the compound. Lightning revealed the barracks in brief flashes. The guards never moved from their posts. Monroe sat beside him. "She can't stay under there forever." "I know." Holt rubbed his face. Exhaustion pulled at him. "But Crenshaw will check the latrines at dawn." The storm finally broke near midnight. Rain became drizzle, then stopped. Clouds parted. Stars appeared cold and distant. At dawn, Crenshaw emerged from the officers' quarters. He walked directly to the women's barracks. His boots splashed through puddles. Holt and Monroe followed at a distance. They reached the barracks as Crenshaw entered. The guards snapped to attention. "Where's the sick woman?" Crenshaw demanded. Yuki stepped forward. She looked exhausted. "Still in latrine. Very weak now." Crenshaw's jaw tightened. He turned to the guards. "Check every latrine. Bring her here." The guards left. Their boots squelched in mud. Minutes passed. The women stood frozen. Reiko remained hidden beneath the floorboard. The guards returned. One shook his head. "Nobody in the latrines, sir. We checked them all." Crenshaw's face flushed red. "What?" "Empty, sir. All of them." Crenshaw spun toward Yuki. "You said she was sick in the latrine." Yuki bowed repeatedly, spoke rapidly in Japanese, pointed to different areas, confused, frightened. Hana joined her. Both women gestured frantically. Their panic looked genuine. Maybe it was. Crenshaw grabbed Yuki's arm. Shook her. "Where is she?" "Stop," Holt stepped forward. "Sir, she doesn't understand complex English." Crenshaw released Yuki. She stumbled back. His eyes fixed on Holt. "Then you explain it, Captain. Where is the missing prisoner?" Holt's mind raced. Think. He needed a believable explanation. Something that would satisfy Crenshaw. "Perhaps she recovered during the night," Holt said carefully. "Dysentery episodes can pass quickly. She may have returned to the barracks while the guards were sheltering from rain." Crenshaw's eyes narrowed. "Then she'd be here now." "Unless she's hiding," Monroe added. "Prisoners fear inspections. She might have panicked when she saw guards and ran." It was weak. Holt knew it, but it was something. Crenshaw stared at them both, then at the women, then back at Holt. The moment stretched thin. "Search this barracks," Crenshaw ordered. "Every corner, under every bunk. Tear it apart if you have to." The guards moved fast. They overturned bunks, ripped through belongings, scattered clothes and blankets across the wet floor. Women cried out. Guards shoved them aside. One kicked a mattress. It slid across the floor, stopped inches from the loose floorboard. Yuki made a sound. "Cut it off." Holt's heart hammered. The guards continued their destruction. They pulled down hanging curtains, opened boxes, dumped out containers. One guard stomped on the floor near the hiding spot, testing boards, listening for hollow spaces. His boot came down hard. The board did not crack, did not sound different. He moved on. The search lasted 20 minutes. The barracks was destroyed, but they found nothing. Crenshaw stood in the center of the wreckage. His breathing was heavy. "She's somewhere in this camp," he pointed at Holt. "And you're going to help me find her?" "Yes, sir," Holt said quietly. Crenshaw left. The guards followed. The women remained motionless, waiting. Holt moved to the door, checked that nobody watched. He nodded once to Yuki. She and Hana rushed to the back corner, cleared debris, lifted the floorboard. Reiko emerged, gasping. Her face was pale. Sweat covered her skin. She clutched her stomach. Holt knelt beside her, checked her pulse. Too fast. He pressed gently on her abdomen, felt movement. The baby was still alive, but Reiko was having contractions. Small ones, early labor triggered by terror and stress. Monroe saw it too. "We need to move her, somewhere safer." "Where?" Holt looked around the destroyed barracks. "Crenshaw will keep searching." "The supply shed," Monroe whispered. "Near the depot. Nobody uses it. It's full of old equipment." Holt nodded. It was risky, but staying here was worse. They had to move her tonight. Morning sun dried the mud. The compound returned to routine. Work details formed. Guards resumed patrols. But tension remained. Holt worked in the medical tent. He treated minor injuries, distributed quinine for malaria prevention. His hands moved automatically while his mind planned. Moving Reiko required supplies, medical equipment, food, water, all without drawing attention. Monroe entered, carrying his bag. He set it down heavily. "Crenshaw's ordered a full camp search for the missing prisoner." He kept his voice low. "He's convinced she's hiding somewhere." "When?" Holt asked. "Tomorrow morning. He's bringing in extra guards from the next camp." Holt's stomach tightened. Tomorrow morning meant tonight was their only chance to relocate Reiko. but gathering supplies in daylight was dangerous. He thought about the supply shed. It sat near the vehicle depot. Rarely visited, but it had no electricity, no running water, just dusty shelves and broken equipment. "We need blankets," Holt said quietly. "Clean ones, and boiled water, bandages, scissors, cord for the umbilical." Monroe nodded. "I can get some from inventory. Say we need them for the clinic." "Not too much at once. Spread it over the day." They worked separately. Holt treated patients. Between visits, he slipped items into his bag: a scalpel, antiseptic, gauze pads. At midday, he walked to the mess hall. The Filipino cook who worked there was kind. His name was Manuel. He had helped before. "Captain?" Manuel wiped his hands on his apron. "What you need?" Holt glanced around. Nobody listened. "Extra rations, biscuits, dried fruit. Whatever you can spare." Manuel studied him. "This for you or for someone else?" Holt met his eyes. "Someone who needs it more." Manuel nodded slowly. "You taking risks, Captain. Big risks." "I know." Manuel disappeared into the storage area, returned with a cloth bag. Biscuits, some dried fish, a can of condensed milk. He pressed it into Holt's hands. "Be careful." "Thank you." Holt tucked the bag under his uniform jacket, walked back across the compound. The afternoon dragged. Heat pressed down. Prisoners worked in the sun. Guards complained about the humidity. Holt made trips to the supply shed. Short visits. He carried items one at a time, left them hidden in the back corner behind rusty barrels. By late afternoon, he had assembled a basic birthing kit. It was not much, not nearly enough for complications, but it was better than nothing. Monroe joined him for the final trip. They stood inside the shed. Dust floated in the dim light. Old crates lined the walls. A broken generator sat in the corner. "This is where she'll have the baby," Monroe said quietly. "If she makes it that far." "She will." Holt forced confidence into his voice. "We'll make sure of it." They heard voices outside, hid behind the crates. 2 guards walked past, laughing about something. Their voices faded. "We move her at midnight," Holt said. "During the guard change. That's when patrols are weakest." Monroe checked his watch. 6 hours. What if Crenshaw posts extra guards at the women's barracks? "Then we improvise." They left separately. Holt returned to the medical tent. Tried to appear normal. Filled out paperwork. Organized supplies. A private arrived with a message. "Captain Holt, Major Crenshaw wants to see you." Holt's chest tightened. "When?" "Now, sir. At his office." Holt walked across the compound. Crenshaw's office was in the administrative building, small and stuffy. A fan turned overhead. Crenshaw sat behind his desk. Papers covered the surface. Maps, duty rosters, reports. "Captain." Crenshaw did not look up. "Close the door." Holt obeyed, stood at attention. "I've been thinking about that missing prisoner," Crenshaw said. He finally raised his eyes. "And about your medical examination." "Sir?" "You spent considerable time with those women, more than necessary for routine checks." Crenshaw leaned back. "Yet somehow you missed that one of them was sick enough to spend hours in a latrine." Holt kept his face neutral. "Dysentery symptoms can develop quickly, sir. Or perhaps she was never sick at all." Crenshaw stood, walked around the desk. "Perhaps someone is hiding her, protecting her, for reasons I can't yet determine." He stopped close to Holt. Too close. Invasion of personal space. A power move. "If I find out you're involved in any deception," Crenshaw said quietly, "I will destroy you. Do you understand?" "I understand, sir." Crenshaw smiled. It did not reach his eyes. "Good, because tomorrow's search will be thorough, very thorough. If she's in this camp, we'll find her." "Yes, sir." "Dismissed," Holt saluted. Left the office. His hands did not shake until he was outside. Monroe waited near the medical tent. Read Holt's expression. What happened? He knows something's wrong. He just can't prove it yet. Holt checked the sun, low on the horizon. We move her tonight, no matter what. Darkness fell slowly. The blackout began. Lanterns extinguished one by one. The compound transformed into shadows and whispers. Holt and Monroe waited in the medical tent. They had changed into darker clothes, removed anything that reflected light. Their medical bags sat ready. At 2300 hours, they moved. The moon was thin. Clouds drifted across stars. Perfect conditions for stealth. They walked along the perimeter, stayed in shadows. The women's barracks appeared ahead. 2 guards stood at the entrance, alert. Crenshaw had doubled the watch. Holt cursed silently. They could not approach directly. Monroe touched his arm, pointed to the rear of the barracks, a gap in the boards where rain had warped the wood, barely wide enough for a person. They circled around, moved quietly through weeds and mud, reached the back wall. Holt tapped 3 times. A signal. Movement inside. The gap widened slightly. Yuki's face appeared. She saw them. Nodded. Minutes passed. The gap widened more. Hana pushed from inside. The boards groaned softly. Then Reiko emerged. Yuki and Hana supported her on both sides. She moved slowly, one hand pressed against her belly. They squeezed through the gap, stood in the darkness behind the barracks. The guards at the front heard nothing. Holt took Reiko's arm. She was shaking. Her breath came short and fast. Another contraction gripped her. She bit down on her hand to stay silent. They waited. The contraction passed. Reiko straightened. They moved as a group. Holt and Yuki supported Reiko. Monroe and Hana walked ahead, scouts checking for patrols. The supply depot was 200 yards away. Open ground between barracks. They had to cross it. Monroe raised his hand. Stop. A guard patrol passed nearby. Flashlight beams swept across the dirt. The group pressed against a building wall. The patrol continued, disappeared around a corner. Monroe waved them forward. They ran, as fast as Reiko could manage. Her breathing grew ragged. Holt felt her weight increase against his shoulder. 50 yards. 25. 10. The supply shed appeared. Monroe opened the door. They rushed inside. Darkness enveloped them. Holt eased Reiko down onto the blankets they had prepared. She collapsed, gasping. Yuki knelt beside her, spoke softly in Japanese, stroked her hair. Hana found the water canteen, held it to Reiko's lips. Monroe closed the door, blocked the cracks with cloth, then lit a small candle. The flame barely illuminated the space. Holt examined Reiko. Her pulse raced. Skin was clammy. He pressed gently on her abdomen, felt the baby's position. Still high. Labor had not progressed far. How long between contractions? He asked Yuki, made a gesture for timing. Yuki held up 10 fingers, then gestured for minutes. 10 minutes apart. Early labor. They had time. Not much, but some. Monroe unpacked their supplies, laid out instruments on a clean cloth, boiled water in a small pot over a camping stove they had smuggled in earlier. Outside, boots marched past. A patrol. They froze. Holt covered the candle with his hand. The flame flickered but stayed lit. The boots faded. Silence returned. Reiko had another contraction, stronger this time. She grabbed Yuki's hand, squeezed hard, her face twisted in pain. Yuki whispered prayers, or maybe curses. Holt could not tell, but her voice calmed Reiko, anchored her. The contraction passed. Reiko's breathing slowed. Holt pulled out the ration biscuits, broke one into pieces, offered them to Reiko. She needed energy. Calories. Her body was burning through everything. She ate slowly, drank more water. Her eyes met Holt's, frightened but grateful. "You're going to be fine," Holt said quietly, even though she did not understand English, even though he was not sure it was true. Monroe checked his watch. 8 minutes between contractions now. Labor was progressing. Faster than expected. Holt's stomach tightened. Premature babies were fragile, and they had almost no equipment, no incubator, no oxygen, no backup if complications arose. Yuki began singing, low and soft, a Japanese lullaby. The melody was sad and beautiful. Reiko closed her eyes. Tears slipped down her cheeks. Hana joined the song. Their voices blended in the darkness. Monroe listened. Even he seemed moved despite not understanding the words. Holt prepared his instruments, washed his hands in boiled water. This was happening. Tonight, in a supply shed behind enemy lines with guards hunting for the woman whose child he was about to deliver. Another contraction hit. Reiko cried out. Holt clamped his hand over her mouth, gently but firm. "Quiet," he whispered urgently. "Please." She bit down on his palm. Drew blood. He did not pull away. The contraction ended. Reiko released him, looked horrified at the bite mark. Holt smiled, showed her it was fine, just a small wound, nothing compared to what she was enduring. Outside, thunder rumbled, another storm building. Monroe looked at the ceiling. Rain would help mask sound. Yeah. Holt checked Reiko again. 6 minutes between contractions. If it comes in time. While Holt worked in the supply shed, another drama unfolded across the camp. Kato sat in his cramped hut. He was thin and bitter, a male prisoner who resented everyone, especially the women who received any kindness from the doctors. He had watched the black medics come and go from the women's barracks, noticed the extra attention, the whispered conversations. Something was happening. Something secret. And secrets had value. Kato waited until a guard patrol passed his area. Then he called out, "Guard, I have information." Corporal Mills approached, the same guard who had confronted Holt days earlier. "What do you want?" "I know about missing woman," Kato said in broken English. "I know where she go." Mills stopped. Interest flickered in his eyes. "You know where she is?" "Maybe." Kato smiled, showed broken teeth. "But information has price. I want better food, more rations, cigarettes." Mills considered this. "Tell me what you know first." "No." Kato crossed his arms. "Deal first, then I talk." Mills thought about it. Information about the missing prisoner would please Crenshaw, might even earn Mills a promotion. And what did he care about giving this pathetic man a few extra biscuits? "Fine," Mills said. "Tell me. If it's useful, I'll get you rations." Kato leaned forward. "The doctors, the black ones, they hide her. I see them go to women's barracks at night. I see them carry things, blankets, food. They protect her." Mills's eyes widened. "You're sure?" "Yes. I watch many nights. They think nobody see, but I see everything." Mills grinned. This was exactly what Crenshaw suspected. Proof that the black doctors were helping prisoners, undermining military authority. "Wait here," Mills ordered. He walked quickly towards the officers' quarters. Kato waited, smiled to himself. Soon he would have better food, maybe even a warmer blanket, all because he betrayed people who were suffering. He felt no guilt. Survival meant taking opportunities, and the women had nothing he needed. Mills reached Crenshaw's door, knocked hard. "Sir, urgent information!" Inside, Crenshaw had been reviewing maps. He opened the door, saw Mills's excited expression. "What is it?" "I have a witness, sir. A prisoner who says the black doctors have been hiding the missing woman. Says he's seen them sneaking around, bringing her supplies." Crenshaw's face hardened. "Who's the witness?" "Male prisoner named Cato. He's in the work detail section." "Bring him to my office, now." Crenshaw grabbed his uniform jacket. This was the proof he needed. Evidence of insubordination, maybe even treason. Mills ran back to Cato's hut. "Come with me. Major wants to talk to you." Cato stood eagerly. Finally, someone important would listen to him. They walked to the administrative building, entered Crenshaw's office. The major sat behind his desk. His expression was cold and focused. "You're Cato?" Crenshaw asked. "Yes, sir." "Tell me what you know about the missing prisoner." Cato repeated his story, embellished parts, made it sound more suspicious. He watched Crenshaw's face harden with each detail. "Where are they hiding her?" Crenshaw demanded. Cato hesitated. He did not actually know. He had only seen the doctors moving around, not where they went. I'm not sure exact place, but they go toward supply area, near depot." Crenshaw stood. "Mills, get 6 men, armed. We're checking every building in that sector." "Yes, sir." Crenshaw looked at Cato. "If you're lying to me, you'll regret it." "Not lying, sir. I tell truth." Crenshaw grabbed his pistol, holstered it. "We move now, before they can relocate her again." He strode out of the office. Mills and other guards scrambled to follow. They armed themselves with rifles, flashlights, determination. The storm clouds overhead finally broke. Rain began falling, light at first, then harder. Crenshaw did not care. He marched toward the supply depot. His boots splashed through forming puddles. Lightning illuminated his grim expression. Behind him, 6 guards followed, ready to tear apart every building, ready to find the hidden prisoner and the doctors protecting her. Inside the supply shed, Holt heard the rain begin, did not know that betrayal was marching toward them through the storm. Morning brought oppressive heat. The storm from the previous night had passed. Puddles steamed in the sun. The compound woke slowly. Holt had not slept. He sat in the medical tent. His eyes burned with exhaustion. Monroe paced near the entrance. They had moved Reiko back to the women's barracks before dawn, hidden her again beneath the floorboards. Her labor had stopped, false contractions brought on by stress. She was stable, for now. But Holt knew they were running out of time. At 900 hours, whistles blew. Guards shouted orders. All prisoners were commanded to the parade ground. Immediate assembly. No exceptions. Holt and Monroe exchanged looks. This was Crenshaw's promised search. The parade ground filled with prisoners, men on one side, women on the other. Guards surrounded them with rifles ready. Crenshaw stood on a platform. His uniform was immaculate despite the humidity. He surveyed the assembled prisoners with contempt. "One of you is missing," he announced. His voice carried across the ground. "One Japanese woman has been hiding for 2 days. This stops now." He stepped down from the platform, walked slowly between the rows of women. His eyes examined each face, each body. "If she does not come forward," Crenshaw continued, "I will reduce rations for all prisoners by half. You will all suffer for her deception." The women remained silent. Yuki and Hana stood near the front. Their faces showed nothing. Crenshaw reached them. Stopped. "You two were friends with the missing woman." It was not a question. "Where is she?" Yuki stared straight ahead. Said nothing. Crenshaw grabbed her chin, forced her to look at him. "I asked you a question." "No understand," Yuki said, her English suddenly worse than before. Crenshaw released her roughly, turned to Hana. "What about you?" Hana did not even acknowledge him. Her eyes focused on the horizon. Defiant silence. Crenshaw's face flushed. "Fine. Have it your way." He gestured to the guards. "Begin the search. Every building, every structure. Tear this camp apart if you have to." The guards dispersed. Prisoners remained standing, forced to watch as their meager possessions were destroyed in the hunt. Guards entered the women's barracks. Sounds of destruction carried across the parade ground. Bunks crashed, wood splintered, belongings scattered. Holt watched from the side. His heart pounded. Would they find the hiding spot? Had he and Monroe hidden Reiko well enough? Minutes stretched. The sun climbed higher. Prisoners swayed in the heat. Some collapsed. Monroe moved to help, but was waved back by guards. Finally, guards emerged from the women's barracks, empty-handed, frustrated. One shook his head at Crenshaw. The major's jaw tightened. "The supply depot. Check every shed, every vehicle, every crate." More guards rushed toward the depot area. Holt felt ice in his stomach. They were getting close. Too close. Monroe stood rigid beside him. "If they find evidence we were there." "I know." The search continued. Hour after hour, the sun beat down mercilessly. Prisoners dropped from heat exhaustion. Guards grew irritable and violent. By noon, Crenshaw was furious. They had found nothing. The missing woman had vanished completely. He returned to the platform. His face was red. Sweat stained his uniform. "Since nobody will talk," he announced, "new rules begin now. All prisoners will have supervised bathroom breaks. 3 minutes maximum. All medical care requires my personal approval. All food rations reduced until the missing woman is found." Murmurs rippled through the prisoners. Fear, anger, desperation. "And these two." Crenshaw pointed at Holt and Monroe. "Will conduct no further prisoner examinations without my direct supervision. Any violation will result in immediate court-martial." Holt felt the net tightening. Crenshaw was cutting off their access to the women, making it impossible to help Reiko. The prisoners were dismissed. They shuffled back to their barracks, defeated, exhausted. Holt returned to the medical tent, sat down heavily. His hands shook from fatigue and fear. Monroe poured water from a canteen, drank deeply. "We can't check on her now. Can't move her. Can't do anything without Crenshaw watching." "I know." Holt stared at the tent wall. "We're trapped." Outside, guards maintained aggressive patrols. Extra men brought in from nearby camps. The compound transformed into a pressure cooker. Everyone watched everyone else. Trust disappeared. Paranoia reigned. Crenshaw had created a prison within a prison. And somewhere beneath a floorboard, Reiko waited. Pregnant. Alone. Terrified. Holt closed his eyes. Prayed she would stay hidden just a little longer. Prayed the baby would not come yet. Prayed they would find some way out of this nightmare. But prayer felt hollow. In a place designed to crush hope, faith was just another casualty. Evening settled over the camp. Holt treated patients in the medical tent. Minor injuries, malaria symptoms, everything supervised by a guard Crenshaw had assigned. The guard sat in the corner. Young corporal named Briggs. He watched everything. Took notes. Made Holt's skin crawl. An MP entered the tent. "Captain Holt, got a message from Corporal Mills. Says he has information you need to hear." Holt's stomach tightened. "What information?" "Didn't say, but he's waiting by the motor pool. Wants to talk privately." The guard in the corner looked up. Major said no unsupervised interactions. "This is official business," the MP replied. "From another NCO. Captain needs to respond." The guard hesitated, then shrugged. "Fine, but make it quick." Holt followed the MP out. They walked across the compound. The motor pool sat near the southern fence. Jeeps and trucks parked in rows. Mills waited in the shadows between vehicles. "Captain?" Mills smiled, that same cruel smile. Thanks for coming. What do you want? Holt kept his distance. Wanted to give you a friendly warning. Mills lit a cigarette. See, I talked to a prisoner today. Real talkative fellow. Cato. You know him? Holt's chest tightened. He knew where this was going. Cato says you and Lieutenant Monroe have been sneaking around, Mills continued. Says you've been helping prisoners, hiding things, maybe hiding someone. That prisoner is lying. Holt kept his voice steady. He's trying to get better treatment by making up stories. Maybe. Mills blew smoke. But Major Crenshaw believes him, and tomorrow morning Crenshaw's conducting a full inspection of all storage areas, every shed, every building near the depot. The supply shed. They were going to search the supply shed. Mills watched Holt's face, saw the flash of recognition. Yeah, that shed. The one nobody ever uses. Strange place for anyone to be interested in, don't you think? Holt said nothing. His mind raced. They had to move Reiko tonight, before Crenshaw's inspection. I'm telling you this, Mills continued, because I want to see what happens when they find what you've been hiding. Gonna be real entertaining watching you black boys get court-martialed. He flicked his cigarette into the dirt, walked away laughing. Holt stood frozen. The sun had set. Darkness crept across the compound. He needed to find Monroe. Needed to make a plan. Fast. He returned to the medical tent. The guard was gone. Monroe stood there alone. Worried. Cato talked, Holt said immediately. He told them we've been near the depot. Crenshaw's searching all those buildings tomorrow morning. Monroe's face went pale. We left supplies there. Medical equipment. If they find it, we need to move her tonight, and we need to remove any evidence from that shed. How? Crenshaw's got guards everywhere. We're under constant watch. Holt thought hard. There had to be a way. Some distraction, some opportunity. The storm, Monroe said suddenly. Weather reports say another storm tonight. Heavy rain. Visibility will be terrible. That could work. Holt moved to the tent entrance, watched the sky. Clouds gathered on the horizon. If we wait until the rain starts, guards will seek shelter. We'll have a window. A small one. It's all we have. They waited, treated evening patients, maintained normal routines. The guard returned, watched them with suspicious eyes. At 2200 hours, the first drops fell. Then more. Within minutes, rain poured down. Thunder cracked overhead. Lightning illuminated the camp in brief flashes. Guards retreated under overhangs. Patrols delayed. Visibility dropped to almost nothing. Holt and Monroe grabbed their bags, told the supervising guard they needed to check on supplies before they got ruined by leaks. The guard looked at the rain, looked at them, decided staying dry was more important than following two medics around in a storm. They ran through the downpour, reached the supply shed, opened the door. Inside was dark and musty. Monroe lit a match. The supplies they had hidden were still there. Blankets, medical instruments, food rations. They grabbed everything, stuffed it into bags, worked fast. Thunder covered the sound of their movements. We need to get this back to the medical tent, Holt said. Hide it with regular supplies. They carried the bags out. Rain soaked them instantly. They could barely see 5 feet ahead. Halfway back, a flashlight beam cut through the rain. Who's there? They froze. A guard approached, rifle ready. Medical officers, Monroe called out, securing supplies from weather damage. The guard came closer, saw their uniforms, their bags. In the storm? What's so important? Sterile instruments, Holt lied smoothly. Can't let them get contaminated by roof leaks. The guard hesitated. Lightning flashed. He saw their faces, recognized them. All right, get moving. They Hurried past, reached the medical tent, hid the supplies quickly, mixed them with existing inventory. Monroe collapsed onto a stool. That was too close. We still need to move Reiko, Holt reminded him. The shed is empty now, but she's still under that floorboard. We can't move her in this storm, and with Crenshaw's inspection tomorrow. Monroe trailed off. The impossibility of their situation was clear. Holt stared at the rain hammering the tent. They were out of options. Out of time. And tomorrow Crenshaw would find nothing in the supply shed, which meant he would intensify his search elsewhere, including the women's barracks. Midnight approached. The storm showed no signs of stopping. Rain drummed endlessly on roofs. Mud covered everything. The camp was a swamp. Holt could not wait any longer. Reiko had to be moved. Tonight. Despite the risks, he and Monroe left the medical tent. The supervising guard had fallen asleep. They moved quietly, stayed low, used the storm as cover. The women's barracks appeared through sheets of rain. 2 guards huddled under the eaves, miserable but alert. Holt cursed silently. They could not approach the front, could not sneak around back with guards so close. Monroe grabbed his arm, pointed toward a work shed, 30 yards from the barracks. If they could create a distraction there, draw the guards away. Holt nodded. Monroe circled around, disappeared into the rain. Minutes passed. Holt waited. Cold water ran down his neck. His uniform was drenched, then a crash, metal clattering, voices shouting from the direction of the work shed. The guards at the barracks turned, exchanged looks. One went to investigate. The other hesitated but followed his partner. Holt moved fast, reached the barracks, knocked his signal on the door. 3 rapid taps. Yuki opened immediately. She had been waiting, hoping. "Reiko," Holt whispered urgently. "We move her now." Yuki nodded, turned back inside. Hana was already lifting the floorboard. Reiko emerged slowly. She looked worse, pale, exhausted. Her belly seemed larger, lower. Labor was progressing. Real labor this time. They helped her stand. She gripped Holt's arm. Her nails dug into his skin. A contraction hit. She doubled over, bit her lip to stay silent. The contraction passed. They moved toward the door. Outside, rain and darkness waited. Monroe appeared. "Guards are distracted, but not for long. We have maybe 3 minutes." 3 minutes to move a pregnant woman in labor across the compound, through mud and rain, while guards hunted for them. They supported Reiko on both sides. Yuki and Hana came too. They would not leave her. The group moved together. Slow. Too slow. Reiko's breathing grew labored. She stumbled. They caught her. 50 yards to the supply shed. 40. 30. Each step felt impossible. Behind them, voices rose. The guards had finished checking the work shed, were returning to their posts, would notice the women were gone. 20 yards! Reiko cried out. Another contraction. Stronger. She collapsed. They could not stop. Holt lifted her. She was light but unwieldy. Monroe took her legs. They carried her. 10 yards. Voices grew louder behind them. Flashlight beams swept through the rain. They reached the shed. Monroe kicked the door open. They rushed inside, laid Reiko down on the floor. Yuki closed the door. Darkness engulfed them. Outside, boots splashed through mud. Guards searching, shouting. The group pressed against the walls, hardly breathing. Reiko gripped Holt's hand. Her nails drew blood. Another contraction. She opened her mouth to scream. Holt clamped his hand over it gently. Hana whispered desperately in her ear. Japanese words that sounded urgent, pleading. The contraction peaked. Reiko's body arched. Holt felt her shake, felt her pain through his palm. Then it passed. She went limp, gasping. Outside, a guard stopped near the shed door. "Check in there?" "Nah, it's locked," Nobody's been in that shed for weeks. You sure? Yeah, come on. They're probably hiding in one of the barracks. The boots moved away. Voices faded. Monroe exhaled slowly. That was too close. Holt agreed. But there was no time to celebrate. Reiko needed help. The baby was coming. He felt her abdomen. The baby had dropped. Crowning would begin soon. Maybe within hours. They were trapped. The storm outside covered sound, but also prevented escape. Guards were actively searching. Crenshaw would inspect this shed in the morning, and Reiko was about to give birth in a dusty storage room with minimal supplies and no backup plan. Holt looked at Monroe, at Yuki and Hana, at Reiko lying on the floor, her face twisted in pain and fear. We deliver the baby here, Holt said quietly. Tonight. Then we figure out what comes next. Monroe pulled supplies from his bag, boiled water on their small stove, prepared instruments. Outside, the storm raged. Thunder shook the walls. Lightning flickered through cracks in the boards. And inside, a woman who should never have been imprisoned prepared to bring new life into a world that had already shown how little mercy it possessed. The night deepened. Rain hammered the shed roof. Inside, a single candle provided light. Holt knelt beside Reiko. Her contractions were 3 minutes apart now. Monroe sterilized instruments in boiling water. Yuki held Reiko's hand, whispered encouragement. Hana pressed a damp cloth to Reiko's forehead. How far along? Monroe asked. Holt checked again. 8 centimeters. Almost ready. Reiko's eyes were wide with terror. She understood what was happening. Understood she was about to give birth surrounded by strangers in a shed that smelled of rust and decay. But she was too tired to protest, too far into labor to stop it. Another contraction gripped her. She arched. Her scream came out muffled through clenched teeth. Hana covered her mouth gently. Sound could not escape. Not with guards. Still searching. The contraction ended. Reiko collapsed back. Tears streamed down her face. Thunder crashed overhead. The storm intensified. Wind howled. The shed walls creaked but held. Holt washed his hands again, prepared for the final stage. Monroe positioned the candle for better light. Their shadows danced grotesquely on the walls. Next contraction, Holt said quietly. She needs to push. Yuki translated with gestures. Reiko nodded weakly. Understood. They waited. Seconds felt eternal. Then Reiko's body tensed. The contraction built. Holt gave the signal. Push, he said firmly. Now. Reiko pushed. Her face turned red. Veins stood out on her neck. Yuki braced her shoulders. Hana counted in Japanese. Holt saw the crown, the baby's head beginning to emerge. Dark hair, wrinkled skin. Again, he commanded. One more. Reiko gathered herself. The contraction peaked. She pushed with everything she had. The baby's head emerged fully. Holt supported it carefully, checked for the cord. Clear. He turned the shoulders. Guided gently. One more push, he said. Last one. Reiko screamed. Could not help it. The sound was raw, primal. Hana tried to muffle it, but the storm swallowed most of it. The baby slid free, into Holt's waiting hands. Small, fragile, covered in blood and fluid. For a terrible moment, nothing happened. The baby did not cry, did not move, just lay still in Holt's palms. Monroe grabbed a cloth, wiped the infant's face, cleared airways, rubbed the tiny chest. Still nothing. Holt's heart sank. Premature babies often struggled. Sometimes they did not make it. Sometimes, despite everything you did, death won. Then a shuddering breath. A cough. The baby's chest expanded. Small arms jerked, and finally, a weak cry. The sound was beautiful. Proof of life. Proof that miracles could happen even in hell. Holt tied and cut the umbilical cord, wrapped the baby in a clean cloth, placed her on Reiko's chest. A girl, tiny but alive. Her cries grew stronger, more insistent. Reiko looked down at her daughter, touched the small face. Tears fell freely. She spoke in Japanese, words that sounded both heartbroken and grateful. Yuki cried, too. Hana smiled despite her own tears. Monroe sat back, exhausted, relieved. Holt checked Reiko, delivered the afterbirth, checked for complications. She was bleeding but within normal range. She would live. The baby quieted, found her mother's warmth, settled against her chest. Her tiny hand gripped Reiko's finger. For a moment, everything was perfect. Despite the location, despite the danger, despite everything wrong in the world, a mother held her newborn daughter. And that was enough. Then boots splashed outside, multiple pairs, coming closer. Monroe extinguished the candle. Darkness consumed them. They froze. The footsteps stopped right outside the shed door. A voice said, "Major wants this one checked too. Now." The door handle rattled. Someone tried to open it, found it locked. "Break it down!" Another voice commanded. This was it. Discovery. End of everything. Holt held the newborn close. Reiko clutched Yuki. Hana pressed against the wall. Then another voice cut through the rain. Louder. Authoritative. "Crenshaw, what the hell are you doing?" The boots outside hesitated. Someone new had arrived. Someone with authority. Inside the supply shed, Holt pressed the newborn against his chest. The baby made small sounds, too loud in the silence. He covered her gently with the cloth, muffled the noise. Outside, the new voice spoke again. "Colonel Stanton, I'm here for my scheduled inspection. What's happening?" Crenshaw's voice came sharp, defensive. "Sir, we're conducting a search for an escaped prisoner, following up on intelligence." "In the middle of a storm? At 0200 hours?" Stanton sounded skeptical. "That seems excessive, Major." Holt's heart hammered. A colonel outranked Crenshaw. But would this colonel care about prisoners? Would he support what Crenshaw was doing? The door handle rattled again. Someone pushed hard. The lock held, but the wood groaned. "This shed is empty," Crenshaw insisted, "but we need to verify. Part of a complete search." "Very well," Stanton said, "but I'll observe. Make sure procedures are followed correctly." Holt looked at Monroe through the darkness. They were trapped. No way out. The baby shifted in his arms, made another small cry. Yuki pressed her hand over her mouth. Her eyes were wide with terror. Reiko lay on the floor, too weak to move. Blood still seeped from between her legs. Not dangerous amounts, but enough to leave evidence. The door shuddered. Someone hit it hard. The lock mechanism cracked. One more hit and it would break. Holt made a decision. He stood, moved towards the door. If they were going to be discovered, he would control how it happened. "Wait," Monroe hissed. "What are you doing?" "Saving their lives," Holt whispered back. He unlocked the door from inside, opened it slowly. Rain poured in, wind howled, lightning flashed. Crenshaw stood there, soaked uniform, furious expression. Behind him were 4 MPs with rifles, and behind them stood a tall man in a colonel's uniform. Older, gray hair, sharp eyes. Crenshaw's face twisted when he saw Holt. "You!" His hand went to his pistol. "What are you doing in there?" Holt stepped into the doorway, blocked the view inside. "Delivering a baby, sir. Medical emergency." "Medical emergency?" Crenshaw's voice rose. "You're hiding an escaped prisoner. That's treason." "She's not a prisoner of war," Holt said calmly. "She's a civilian internee, and she's a woman who just gave birth. She needs medical care, not interrogation." Crenshaw drew his pistol, pointed it at Holt. "Step aside, Captain. That's an order." Holt did not move. Behind him, the baby cried louder. The sound pierced the storm. clear, undeniable. New life announcing itself. Colonel Stanton stepped forward. "Major, lower your weapon." "Sir, this officer is harboring an enemy." "I said lower your weapon." Stanton's voice was steel. "Now." Crenshaw hesitated, then slowly lowered the pistol. His face was red with rage. Stanton approached the doorway, looked at Holt. "Captain, what's the situation inside?" "A premature birth, sir. Mother and infant are alive but need immediate medical attention. The baby is small, possibly underweight. They both require warmth and proper care." Stanton peered past Holt, saw Monroe kneeling beside Reiko, saw Yuki and Hana huddled protectively, saw the newborn wrapped in blood-stained cloth. "How long has this woman been in labor?" Stanton asked. "Several hours, sir. Labor began unexpectedly. We had no choice but to deliver here." Stanton studied Holt's face, searched for deception, found only exhaustion and determination. "Why here?" Stanton asked. "Why not the medical tent?" Holt met his eyes. "Because Major Crenshaw intended to remove her from camp the moment he discovered she was pregnant. We feared for her safety, for the child's safety." "That's a lie," Crenshaw shouted. "He's been hiding her for days, falsifying records. This is deliberate insubordination." Stanton raised his hand. Silence fell. He looked at the scene again. A black captain standing in the rain, shielding a Japanese woman and her newborn, risking everything. Behind them, Crenshaw and his men, guns drawn, ready to storm in, ready to seize a woman who had just given birth. The moment hung suspended. Rain fell, thunder rumbled. The baby cried. Stanton made his decision. Colonel Stanton turned to Crenshaw. His expression was hard. "Major, explain to me why you thought conducting an armed raid on a medical situation was appropriate." Crenshaw sputtered. "Sir, this officer has been hiding a prisoner, lying in official reports. He falsified—" "Did you know this woman was pregnant?" Stanton interrupted. "I suspected. She went missing from—" "Did you file a medical concern? Request proper prenatal care? Ensure her safety?" Stanton's voice was sharp. "Or did you simply hunt her like an animal?" Crenshaw's mouth opened, closed. No answer came. Stanton looked at the MPs. "You men, stand down. Lower your weapons." The MPs hesitated, looked at Crenshaw. He was their commanding officer. But Stanton outranked him. "That's an order," Stanton said quietly. "Lower your weapons now." The rifles lowered. The tension eased slightly. Stanton approached Holt. "Captain, I need you to be honest with me. Did you falsify medical records?" Holt could lie. Continue the deception. But something in Stanton's face suggested honesty might be the better path. "Yes, sir," Holt said. "I wrote that Reiko showed no signs of pregnancy. That was false. She was 7 months along when I examined her." "Why?" "Because I knew what would happen if I reported it. She would be removed, interrogated. The baby would be taken. I couldn't allow that." Stanton nodded slowly. "So you broke regulations, disobeyed orders, risked court-martial." "Yes, sir." "To protect a woman and her unborn child." "Yes, sir." Stanton was quiet for a moment. Rain dripped from his cap. Behind him, Crenshaw waited, eager to see the black captain destroyed. "Major Crenshaw," Stanton said without turning around. "You are relieved of command, effective immediately." Crenshaw's face went white. "What?" "Sir, you can't—" "I can, and I am." Stanton finally turned. "You created an environment where a pregnant woman felt she had to hide rather than receive medical care. You conducted unauthorized nighttime raids. You've shown racial prejudice in your treatment of both prisoners and your own officers." "This is because he's—" Crenshaw stopped himself, but everyone knew what word he almost said. "Because he's what, Major?" Stanton stepped closer. "Go ahead. Finish that sentence." Crenshaw's jaw clenched, said nothing. "You're confined to quarters pending an investigation," Stanton continued. "Corporal Mills, escort the major to his quarters. Post a guard." Mills looked stunned, but he moved forward. "Yes, sir. This way, Major." Crenshaw stared at Stanton. Hatred burned in his eyes, but he turned, walked away through the rain. His career was finished. Everyone knew it. The remaining MPs shifted uncomfortably. They had been part of Crenshaw's hunt. They wondered if they would face consequences, too. Stanton addressed them. "You men are dismissed. Return to your posts. Speak to no one about what happened here tonight. Understood?" "Yes, sir." They left quickly, grateful to escape. Stanton turned back to Holt. "Now, let's deal with this medical situation properly. What do mother and child need?" "Warmth," Holt said. "Clean bedding. Monitoring for the next 24 hours. The baby is premature. She's at risk for respiratory problems." "The medical tent?" "Yes, sir. That would be ideal." Stanton nodded. "Lieutenant Monroe, get a stretcher. We'll transport the mother carefully. Captain Holt, you carry the infant. I'll clear the path." They moved into action. Monroe retrieved a canvas stretcher from the shed. They carefully lifted Reiko onto it. She was semi-conscious, exhausted beyond measure. Holt wrapped the baby in dry cloth, held her close to his chest. She was so small, so fragile. He could feel her heartbeat against his hand, fast and strong. Yuki and Hana walked beside the stretcher. They held Reiko's hands, spoke softly in Japanese, words of comfort, of hope. The group moved through the rain. Stanton led. His presence kept guards at a distance. Nobody questioned a colonel. Nobody dared. They reached the medical tent, carried Reiko inside, laid her on a clean cot. Monroe started checking vital signs. Holt examined the baby under better light. She was tiny, maybe 4 pounds. Her skin had a slight blue tinge. Breathing was rapid but steady. Her eyes opened briefly, dark and unfocused. "She needs an incubator," Holt said. "We don't have one." "Make do with what you have," Stanton replied. "I'll authorize whatever supplies you need." Holt created a makeshift warming station, hot water bottles wrapped in towels, a box lined with blankets. He placed the baby inside, monitored her carefully. Reiko slept, her body recovering from trauma. Yuki and Hana sat nearby, refusing to leave. Stanton watched everything. His expression was unreadable. Finally, he spoke. "Captain Holt, what you did was illegal, wrong by military law." "I know, sir. But it was right by any decent moral standard." Stanton paused. "I won't report the falsified records. As far as the official record shows, this woman went into unexpected labor. You responded appropriately. Understood?" "Yes, sir." Holt felt relief wash over him. "Thank you, sir." "Don't thank me. Just take care of them." Stanton moved toward the tent exit, stopped. "And Captain? Well done." He left. The rain finally began to ease. Dawn approached slowly. The storm was ending. Morning light filtered through the tent. Holt sat beside the makeshift incubator. He had not slept. His eyes burned, but he could not rest. The baby needed constant monitoring. She stirred occasionally, made small movements. Her chest rose and fell rapidly, too rapidly, but she was breathing, fighting. Monroe checked Reiko's vitals. "Blood pressure's stabilizing, heart rate normal. She's out of immediate danger." Yuki and Hana dozed in chairs. Exhaustion had finally claimed them. They leaned against each other, still holding hands with Reiko. The tent flap opened. A private entered. "Captain Holt, Colonel Stanton requests your presence. His temporary office, immediately." Holt looked at Monroe. "You'll watch them?" "Of course. Go." Holt stood. His body ached. Every muscle protested, but he straightened his uniform, walked out into the humid morning. The camp was quiet. Most prisoners still slept. Guards changed shifts. Everything looked normal. But Holt knew everything had changed. He reached the administrative building. Stanton had taken over Crenshaw's office. The door stood open. "Come in, Captain." Stanton sat behind the desk. Papers covered the surface. "Close the door." Holt obeyed, stood at attention. "At ease." Stanton gestured to a chair. "Sit down. This isn't formal." Holt sat, waited. Stanton studied him. "I've been reviewing files. Yours, Lieutenant Monroe's, Major Crenshaw's. The picture that emerges is troubling." Holt's stomach tightened. Maybe Stanton had reconsidered. Maybe the court-martial was coming after all. "Major Crenshaw ran this camp with cruelty and prejudice," Stanton continued. "His reports are filled with racist language, complaints about black officers, derogatory comments about prisoners. It's disgraceful." He pushed papers across the desk. Holt saw his own name mentioned repeatedly. Insubordinate. Overly sympathetic. Questionable loyalty. "These are serious accusations," Stanton said. "If I believed them, you'd face consequences. But I don't believe them." "Sir? I believe you're a good doctor who saw suffering and chose to help. Military regulations be damned." Stanton leaned back. "Unfortunately, I can't officially commend you. The optics are complicated. A black officer protecting a Japanese prisoner during wartime. Certain people would use it for propaganda, on both sides." Holt understood. The truth was too complex, too uncomfortable. Better to bury it. "However," Stanton continued, "I can make sure you and Monroe face no negative consequences. Your records will note excellent service. When this war ends, you'll receive honorable discharges. Clean records. No mention of tonight." "What about Reiko?" Holt asked. "And the baby?" "The woman will be transferred to a civilian internment camp, one with proper medical facilities. She and her daughter will be together. They'll be treated humanely." Stanton paused. "I'll make sure of it personally." Relief flooded through Holt. "Thank you, sir." "Don't thank me yet. There's a condition." Stanton's expression hardened. "You never speak about this. Not to other soldiers, not to reporters, not in letters home. What happened here stays buried. Forever." "The price of mercy." Silence. Holt nodded. "I understand, sir." "Do you? Because if this story gets out, it could ruin careers, mine included, and it could make things worse for other black servicemen. The military isn't ready for this kind of complexity." "I won't say anything, sir. Neither will Monroe." "Good." Stanton stood, extended his hand. "You're a credit to the uniform, Captain. I'm sorry you served under an officer who couldn't see that." Holt shook his hand. The grip was firm, respectful, more respect than most white officers had ever shown him. He left the office, walked back across the compound. The sun climbed higher. Heat returned. The brief respite from the storm was over. But something had changed. Something fundamental. A black doctor had defied a white major, had chosen humanity over regulations, and had been protected by someone with real power. It was not justice, not even close, but it was something. A small crack in the armor of oppression. A moment of grace in an ungraceful world. Holt returned to the medical tent. The baby slept in her box. Reiko breathed steadily. Monroe smiled. "Everything okay?" Monroe asked. "Yeah." Holt sat down heavily. "Everything's okay." For now, that was enough. 3 days passed. The baby grew stronger. Her breathing steadied. Her color improved from blue-tinged to healthy pink. Reiko named her Aiko. It meant beloved child. Holt checked on them constantly, monitored temperature, watched for signs of infection. Every hour the baby survived felt miraculous. Colonel Stanton had kept his word. Crenshaw remained confined to quarters. A new major arrived to take temporary command. He was professional, distant, asked no uncomfortable questions. On the fourth morning, Stanton visited the Einbarswara court, medical tent. "How are they?" "Both doing well, sir." Holt showed him the baby. Aiko slept peacefully. Tiny fists curled against her chest. "She's gained 2 ounces, feeding well. Reiko's recovering." "Good." Stanton watched the sleeping infant. Something softened in his expression. Transfer orders came through. They leave tomorrow morning. A convoy to a civilian camp in the north. Better conditions. Families allowed. "Will they be safe there?" Holt asked. "Safer than here. I've contacted the camp commander, explained the medical situation. They're prepared." Stanton looked at Holt. "You did good work, Captain." "Just my job, sir." "No, it was more than that. And you know it." Stanton left. Holt returned to his patients. The hours slipped by. He tried to memorize Aiko's face, Reiko's grateful eyes, the way Yuki and Hana sang lullabies. All of it would be gone tomorrow. That evening, Monroe brought rice and vegetables from the mess. Real food, not prisoner rations. They shared it with the women, ate together in the medical tent. Nobody spoke much. Language barriers remained. But understanding transcended words. They had survived something together, created something good in a place designed to destroy goodness. Night fell. Holt sat beside the incubator. Aiko stirred. Her eyes opened, focused on him briefly. He touched her tiny hand. She gripped his finger. "You're going to be okay," he whispered. "You're going to grow up, live a full life. You won't remember this place, won't remember me. That's good. That's how it should be." Reiko watched from her cot. She spoke in Japanese. Yuki translated haltingly. She says, "You are like father to baby. You give life. She never forget." Holt's throat tightened. "Tell her I'll never forget either." Dawn came too quickly. A truck arrived outside, MPs with rifles. But these guards were respectful. Stanton had given orders. The women were to be treated with dignity. Holt prepared Aiko for transport, wrapped her in warm blankets, created a nest of cloth to protect her during the bumpy ride. Reiko held her carefully. Yuki and Hana gathered their few belongings. They moved slowly, reluctant to leave. Despite everything, this place had become familiar. The unknown ahead was frightening. Stanton arrived to supervise. He watched as the women climbed into the truck. Reiko cradled Aiko. The baby slept through it all. Holt stood at the tent entrance, Monroe beside him. They watched in silence. Reiko looked back, met Holt's eyes, bowed her head, a gesture of profound respect, gratitude. Holt bowed back, deeper, holding it longer. The truck started, pulled away. Dust rose in its wake. The women disappeared down the road. Gone. Monroe cleared his throat. "Think we'll hear from them again?" "No," Holt said. "Probably not. But that's okay. They're alive. That's what matters." They returned to the medical tent, started cleaning, putting things back in order, erasing evidence that anyone had ever hidden there. The camp resumed its normal rhythm. Prisoners worked, guards watched. Life continued, as if nothing extraordinary had happened. But Holt knew better. Something had happened. Something that would stay with him forever. In a war defined by hatred and destruction, he had helped create life, had chosen mercy over obedience. That had to count for something. The sun climbed toward noon. Holt completed his daily rounds, treated malaria patients, distributed quinine. The medical work continued. Endless. Necessary. Colonel Stanton appeared at the tent entrance. "Captain, walk with me." They left the medical area, walked toward the perimeter fence, far from other ears. "The transfer went smoothly," Stanton said. "I received confirmation this morning. Mother and child arrived safely at the civilian camp. Medical staff there are monitoring them." "That's good news, sir. Thank you." Stanton stopped walking, looked out at the jungle beyond the wire. "I want you to understand something, Captain. What happened here was extraordinary, but it can never happen again." "Sir? I covered for you because it was the right thing to do, but I broke regulations doing it. If higher command discovers what really happened, we'll all face consequences." Stanton turned to face Holt. "So this stays between us, forever." "I understand, sir." "Do you?" Stanton's eyes were hard. "Because there will be times after this war when you'll want to talk about it, want recognition for what you did. And you can't. Ever." The weight of those words settled heavy. Holt had saved a life, multiple lives. But he could never claim credit, could never share the story. It would remain hidden, buried. "I understand, sir," Holt repeated. "The silence is the price." "Yes." Stanton's expression softened slightly. "I'm sorry it has to be this way. You deserve better. But the world isn't ready for this story. Maybe it never will be." They walked back toward the compound. At the gate, Stanton stopped again. "For what it's worth, Captain Holt, you're one of the finest officers I've ever served with. Black or white, that's the truth." "Thank you, sir." Stanton left. Holt returned to the medical tent. Monroe looked up from his paperwork. "What did he want?" "Just confirming the transfer went well, reminding us to keep quiet." "We will." Monroe set down his pen. "But Isaiah, we did something important, something that mattered." "Yeah." Holt sat down heavily. Exhaustion pulled at him. Days without proper sleep, weeks of stress. It all crashed down at once. "We did." That afternoon, a new batch of prisoners arrived. More Japanese civilians. Men and women, frightened, confused. The war created endless streams of displaced people. Holt examined them, checked for disease, provided basic medical care, tried to offer small moments of dignity. It was all he could do. Days blended together. The camp's rhythm became familiar, oppressive but predictable. Holt settled back into routine. But part of him remained in that supply shed, holding a newborn, choosing humanity over regulations. A week passed, then 2. Monroe received transfer orders. He was being reassigned to a field hospital unit, moving out in 3 days. "I requested you come with me," Monroe said, "but they denied it. You're staying here." Holt felt the loss immediately. Monroe was more than a colleague. He was a friend, a fellow conspirator, one of the few people who understood what they had done. "I'll miss you," Holt said simply. "Same here." Monroe paused. "But we'll both survive this war, get home, build lives, and we'll carry this with us, this knowledge that we did something good." "Even if nobody knows?" "Especially because nobody knows." Monroe smiled. The best acts of courage are the ones nobody sees. On Monroe's last day, they shared a final meal, talked about plans after the war, medicine, family, normal life, dreams that felt impossibly distant. Then Monroe left, truck carrying him down the same road Reiko had traveled, dust rising. Holt stood watching until the vehicle disappeared. Alone now, the sole witness remaining, carrying the secret of what happened in the supply shed. The story nobody could know. But Holt didn't feel alone. He felt connected. To Reiko, to Aiko, to Monroe, to a truth larger than military regulations or wartime prejudice. They had saved a life. Nothing could erase that, not silence, not time, not even the vast machinery of war. It was enough. It had to be. 1 month passed. August heat pressed down. The war continued elsewhere, News arrived sporadically. Victories, defeats, always more casualties. Holt worked alone now. A new medic had been assigned, a young white lieutenant named Patterson. He was competent but distant, asked no questions about what happened before his arrival. The camp had changed. The new major ran things differently. Less cruelty, more efficiency. Prisoners still suffered. But the worst excesses were gone. Holt thought about Reiko and Aiko daily, wondered how they were, hoped they were safe, had no way to know. Then one morning, a jeep arrived. A female nurse stepped out. She wore a Red Cross armband, carried a canvas bag. "Captain Holt?" she asked. "Yes?" "I have something for you. From the civilian internment camp north of here." She reached into her bag, pulled out a cloth pouch, hand-sewn, carefully stitched. "A woman there asked me to deliver this. Japanese woman with an infant daughter. She said you would understand." Holt took the pouch. His hands trembled. "How are they? The woman and baby?" "Doing well. The baby's growing, healthy. The mother works in the camp kitchen now. They have a small room. Basic, but safe." Relief flooded through him. "Thank you. Thank you for telling me." The nurse smiled. "She wanted you to know. Said you saved their lives." She climbed back into the jeep. "Good luck, Captain." She drove away. Holt stood holding the pouch, felt its weight, opened it slowly. Inside were three things: a small photograph, blurry but clear enough, Reiko holding Aiko, both of them smiling, alive, a piece of fabric, hand-embroidered with Japanese characters. He could not read them, but they looked like blessings, prayers, and a note, written in careful English. Someone had helped translate. The letters were shaky but readable. "Captain Holt, you give my daughter life. You give me hope when I have none. I pray for you every day. May you survive this war. May you find peace. You are hero. You are good man. I never forget. Aiko, never forget. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Reiko." Holt read it 3 times, then a 4th. Tears blurred his vision. He wiped them away quickly, looked around to make sure nobody watched. He returned to his tent, hid the pouch under his bunk, lay down, stared at the canvas ceiling. For weeks he had wondered if it mattered, if what he did changed anything. The war was so vast, suffering so endless. One saved life seemed impossibly small, but it mattered to Reiko. It mattered to Aiko. To them, it was everything. That night, Holt slept deeply for the first time in weeks. Dreamless, peaceful, the photograph and note hidden safely beneath his bed. Physical proof that mercy existed, that humanity survived even in darkness. September arrived. The war shifted. Rumors spread about Japanese forces retreating, American advances. Optimism grew among the guards. Prisoners remained cautious. Hope was dangerous. Holt continued his work, treated injuries, distributed medicine. The days blurred together. Routine became numbing. Then, one afternoon, whistles blew. Assembly order, all personnel to the parade ground. Prisoners remained in their barracks. Holt joined the other officers, wondered what announcement was coming. The new major stood on the platform. "Gentlemen, I have orders from command. This camp is being downsized. Most prisoners will be relocated to larger facilities. We're consolidating resources." Murmurs rippled through the assembled soldiers. Change was always unsettling. "Transfer orders are being prepared," the major continued. "Medical staff will remain until the last prisoners are relocated. Captain Holt, you'll be among the final personnel to leave." Holt felt mixed emotions. Relief at eventually leaving this place. Sadness at what it represented. Everything that happened here would be forgotten. Buried in military archives nobody would ever read. The assembly dismissed. Soldiers returned to duties. Holt walked back to the medical tent. Thought about Monroe, about Reiko and Aiko, about all the lives that intersected briefly in this forgotten corner of the war. Over the next week, prisoners were processed and relocated. Buses and trucks arrived daily, took people away. The camp population shrank. Holt said goodbye to prisoners he had treated, men and women whose names he barely knew. They bowed, shook his hand, offered small tokens of gratitude. Oh, carved piece of wood, a smooth stone. Gestures that transcended language. Finally, only a skeleton crew remained. 20 guards, 5 administrative personnel, Holt. The camp felt empty. Ghosts in every building. The major called Holt to his office. "Captain, your transfer orders came through. You leave tomorrow morning. Shipping back stateside. Medical discharge. War service completed." "Thank you, sir." Holt felt numb. The war was ending for him, but it continued for millions of others. "You did good work here," the major said. "I read reports about you, about how you treated prisoners. With respect, dignity. That matters." "Just following my oath, sir. Do no harm." The major smiled slightly. "Not everyone remembers that oath. You did. Be proud of that." Holt packed his few belongings that evening. Medical journals, letters from home, the hidden pouch with Reiko's photograph and note. Everything fit in one duffel bag. He walked the compound one last time, visited the women's barracks, now empty. The floorboard where Reiko hid had been repaired. No evidence remained. He walked to the supply shed, opened the door. Dust covered everything. The space where Aiko was born looked ordinary now, just another forgotten storage area. But Holt remembered, would always remember. The storm, the fear, the impossible choice, the tiny baby in his hands, her first cry. He closed the shed door, walked away. The moon was bright, stars filled the sky, beautiful despite everything. Morning came. A jeep waited. Holt threw his bag in the back, climbed in. The driver was a young private who talked about home, about family, about normal life after the war. Holt listened, responded appropriately, but his mind was elsewhere. On a photograph hidden in his bag, on a woman and child living in a civilian camp, on a promise of silence he would keep forever. The jeep drove down the dirt road. The camp disappeared behind them. Jungle swallowed it. In a few years, nature would reclaim everything. The barracks would rot. The wire would rust. The suffering would be forgotten. But Holt would remember. And somewhere, Reiko would tell Aiko the story. How a black American doctor risked everything to save her life. How mercy survived when everything else had failed. The jeep turned onto a better road, headed toward the coast, toward ships that would carry Holt home, toward whatever life awaited after war. He closed his eyes, felt the sun on his face, allowed himself to hope that Reiko and Aiko were feeling the same sun, somewhere safer, somewhere better. That was enough. 3 months later, December 1944, a small town in Georgia, cold rain fell on bare trees. Captain Isaiah Holt sat in his mother's kitchen. Discharged, home, a civilian again after years in uniform. His mother cooked. His father read the newspaper. Everything was familiar, comforting. And yet Holt felt disconnected. The war had changed him in ways he could not explain. His parents asked questions. He answered carefully, talked about the medical work, the patients he treated, left out the parts they could never understand, never accept. The mail came late afternoon. His mother brought it in. Bills, advertisements, a thin envelope with no return address. Holt opened it. His heart stopped. A photograph fell out, clearer than the first. Aiko sitting up, maybe 5 months old now, chubby cheeks, dark hair, smiling at the camera, and a letter. brief, translated into careful English. Captain Holt, war is ending. We will be free soon. Return to Japan, maybe, or stay in America. I do not know, but I want you to know Aiko is strong. She grows, she laughs. Because of you, she lives. Because of you, I still have hope. You saved more than a life. You saved our humanity. In darkness, you were light. I pray you found peace. I pray America treats you with honor you deserve. Thank you forever. Reiko. Holt read it twice, then folded it carefully, placed it with the first letter. Hidden treasures he could never share. His mother called him for dinner. He joined his family at the table. They blessed the food, talked about neighbors, about church, about ordinary things. Holt participated, smiled, pretended everything was normal. Inside, he carried the weight of what happened. The secret he would keep forever. After dinner, he sat on the porch. Rain had stopped. Stars appeared between clouds. The same stars that hung over a supply shed in the South Pacific, over a civilian camp where Reiko raised her daughter, over Monroe wherever he was now. Years would pass. Decades. Holt would build a medical practice, marry, have children, live a full life. But he would never forget that night in the storm. Never forget the choice he made. Never forget the tiny baby who survived because strangers showed mercy. The photograph would stay hidden. The letters would remain secret. Nobody would know the real story. History would not record it. There would be no medals, no recognition, no glory. But Holt did not need those things. He had something better. The knowledge that when tested, when forced to choose between regulations and humanity, he chose correctly. In a war that demanded obedience, he chose compassion. In a system that valued hierarchy over life, he chose to save one woman and her child. It was not much, did not change the war's outcome, did not end suffering. But it mattered. To Reiko, to Aiko, to him, and sometimes, in a world filled with overwhelming darkness, one small act of light was enough. Holt folded the letter, placed it carefully in his shirt pocket, close to his heart, stood from the porch chair, went inside to his family, to warmth, to safety, to life. Behind him stars shone bright, distant but constant, witnessing everything, forgetting nothing. Silent guardians of a story only a few would ever know. A story of courage shared across cultures, of quiet humanity in an inhumane war, of 3 Japanese women and 2 black doctors who proved that even behind barbed wire, compassion could survive. The story ended. But its echoes would ripple forward. Through Aiko's life, through Holt's children, through every person who learned that mercy matters more than rules, that saving one life redeems 1,000 sorrows, that hope, no matter how fragile, can endure. The war would end, people would return home, scars would slowly heal, and in small moments of grace, survivors would remember. There were still good people, still brave choices, still reasons to believe in humanity. Holt walked inside, closed the door. The night was quiet, peaceful, full of promise. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight he had the photograph, the letters, the memory of holding a newborn in the storm, proof that he had mattered, that his life had meaning. It was enough, more than enough. It was everything.